Hello, I'm Landon Puello of AHS-TV, and in this segment of Best of the Nest, we will take a look at the political divide and how it affects students. But first, Ben Fennell and I hit the halls of AHS to take a closer look.
Hello, I'm Ben Fennell of AHS-TV. Today we are taking a closer look at the political divide in the U.S. I took to the halls of AHS to see what the students had to say. How does the political divide in the U.S. affect you?
It affects me mostly mentally, honestly. Like, there's no physical aspects to it, but in that, so I started Turning Point USA at our high school, and you wouldn't believe the names that people will call me or the things that people have to say without saying them to your face. It's like, for me, I don't care. But for certain views that people have, it just affects me by trying to hold to my views whenever these other people, it's either a lie, it's either not a lie, they don't have backing evidence.
I think political division I think a lot of it's very unnecessary. A lot of people with differing viewpoints, they get too intense, and while people should be passionate about areas of politics, I think it's gotten to the point where it's too aggressive, and it's either you're right or you're wrong, when there should be a lot more like peaceful agreements, or not necessarily agreements, but like they can believe what they want to believe. Everybody has their own opinion. You don't have to agree with everybody.
I think it's very bad, and I think it's turned violent very rapidly, and I think both parties should do everything they can to bridge that gap.
I don't think it necessarily affects me so much as the groups I'm with and other people and how they affect me.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I consider myself politically active a little bit. I mean, obviously, I'm not old enough to vote yet, but as a person, I mean, the political divide really isn't that big of a deal to me.
I feel like it's more just like a familial perspective. Like, different parts of my families have different viewpoints on stuff, and that kind of divides them and makes me not be able to see some parts of my family as much or as often I'd like to. That's really about it for me, specifically.
Right now, I don't think it affects me too much because I'm still living under my parents' roof and things like that, and they help out with a lot of stuff. But I feel like once I get older, it'll probably affect me way more.
Do you think the division in the U.S. affects people our age? Why or why not?
Yeah, it does. It does badly. With social media nowadays, anyone can be influenced by anything they see. I know within my certain friends, and I've had to not fix them at all, but just some things that we see, it's completely false. And social media affects our age. That is the main driving point, I feel, for politics, that there's just not true statements on half the things that occur.
I think kids our age seem they're a little more involved than they are. You know what I mean? I think they try to do too much and way into politics when honestly we're all just kids in this high school. I mean, I'm 18 and I can vote and I have my opinions, but I don't care to hear yours.
I mean, we're starting to get older. We're starting to pay more attention to politics, and the decisions that are made at the higher up level do affect us, at the lower level. Younger level.
It probably trickles down to us. I don't think it affects us as much as when you get older, but definitely has a little bit of a thing going on.
I also got the opportunity to sit down with Mr. Cloak, a social studies teacher here at AHS, to get his thoughts on the matter. I'm Ben Fennell with AHS-TV, and today I'm here with
Mr. Cloak.
Mr. Cloak. How does the political divide in the U.S. affect how young people form their beliefs and opinions?
The political divide and where we're living and how we're living today is definitely a change over the last, I would say, 2 decades in discourse in the political realm. In the United States, prior to the last 15 years or so, was not nearly as divided and as fractioned, we'll say, to where individuals, because of political beliefs or party registration, whatever the case may be, are far more willing to enter into negative comments toward each other than I think they had been previously.
How does seeing opposing views online impact teens' mental health and friendships?
I think if we are categorizing individuals, our friends, our colleagues, people that live in our communities based on what their thoughts are, I think that puts us into a situation where we are not getting to know the whole person and allowing an individual to explain their thoughts and have political discourse that is positive, to where you maybe come to an agreement or are willing to compromise or come back and forth and have the dialogue necessary to come to a decision or an ultimate agreement. If you don't have the willingness to do that, then it's obviously going to be detrimental to the students, or to the community, to everyone involved, because you have to be willing to sit down and have that discussion.
I'd agree. How does the divide in the country affect discussion between students at school?
I think there was a quote that I saw one time, and it says our unwillingness to discuss religion and politics has created a nation of people who don't know how to discuss religion and politics. And when it comes down to it, these are two items that people do have very strong beliefs, very strong convictions, and that's fine. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. In school, our job is to help each student find and develop the skills necessary to make sure those opinions are based on fact and real life events. So if we, for example, in AP Government, we look at multiple sources in the news that cover the same story, the same event. So students can see the bias of the newspaper, the bias of the reporter, completing the story, because not everyone is going to be able to see every aspect. So if you combine different views, different reports, you're going to, at the end of the day, have a much better view of the situation, I believe.
How do families and communities help young people deal with different opinions respectfully?
Well, I think we need to find a way to do it better. We need to get away from the attacks on people just because, and verbal attacks mostly, or refusing to be involved with someone because you disagree with them. I think sitting down, having those conversations is vitally important, and that really does begin in the community as a whole, right? Our elected officials, those who represent us at the local level, at the state level, at the national level, they need to serve as an example of how the political discourse in this country should be, and we definitely have examples throughout our history of individuals willing to sit down and overcome the differences to work for the betterment of the people that they represent. And two of the best examples of that would be President Reagan and Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill during Reagan's term in office of president. Reagan, very staunch conservative. Speaker O'Neill, a very left liberal leader from Boston, but they were able to develop a personal friendship that surpassed their political differences. And I think because of that, they're able to make positive changes for the country.
How might growing up in a divided country affect how young people take part in politics or community activities later on?
The goal of government should be to help people, make life better for those, whether it be state, local, national. I think that the long-term effect's going to be people see politics as a blood sport rather than an opportunity to serve the community. I think it's up to your generation, Ben, your counterparts, to change the script. Talk about the positives. Sit down with people you disagree with and see what it is that you can work together. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and we need to figure out a way to get along and live peacefully with each other and overcome some of those differences. And I think you can do that simply by seeing people as people. And if you see everyone as a person, as a human, I think that's a good start. And from there, you can hopefully form a relationship that allows you to work through the differences.
And I'd hope my generation would take part in that, but do you think government officials should also help take part in that, changing the stereotype of what politics has become today?
Absolutely.
Well, there you have it, folks, straight from the Hawks Peak.
We're all searching, for opportunity, a challenge. Here, asking what if, what's possible, is the mindset. Welcome to the Oak Grove at IUP, where big-time research opportunities are for the many, not just the few. And world-renowned professors ignite ambitions. Search here, and there's no telling how far you'll grow. Get in the Grove at IUP.
For those of you just joining us, I'm Landon Perlo of AHS-TV, and I am now joined by Nate Raymer and Ryder Prunty, both students here at AHS. Welcome to Best of the Nest.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Of course. Let's get started off. How noticeable do you think the political divide in the United States is among students here at Armstrong?
I think it's definitely becoming more prevalent, especially with older kids, just because many of us, myself included, are at the age where we can now go out and vote. So we need to make the decisions of what ideologies we personally subscribe to.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot more people are getting more involved with it. Like, well, from how we were in 9th grade and you in 10th, seeing now people talk about it more and getting more involved with it is really noticeable.
Yes, and of course, as you get older, your views on politics will sort of strengthen, and you'll have stronger opinions on events that occur than you would, say, when you were in 8th grade or 7th grade.
Yeah. In your experience, does politics ever influence friendships or social groups within the school?
For me, no, but I can certainly see how they would impact your relationships, because if someone is so far on one side that they really don't tolerate anyone who views differently from them, especially in this modern climate where that is normalized, that could cause problems with relationships.
I think it can absolutely shape friendships, although something I've noticed is that a lot of people form these groups based on their beliefs, and they all seem to share the same sentiment toward issues.
Yeah. Do you feel comfortable discussing political topics at school, or do you think most students try to avoid them? Why?
I would say yes. It's important to express your ideas really for two main reasons. First, it's the main piece of voting. If you don't know what your beliefs are, how are you going to go out and pick a candidate that would best represent you? It's really just part about having a voice and being part of the democracy that we live in. And also, many of the decisions that both Congress, the President, even the Supreme Court make on a daily basis affect all of us in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and we should be able to debate these safely. And I think especially in the modern day, if we are in a climate where people are uncomfortable debating topics, that is a problem.
I think some people might be less comfortable because of how they feel like, or see other people maybe will hate on them or argue with them more, because it's just their opinion and they don't want to get in a fight about it, but other people might not agree with it, and just how the world's becoming, that people will just start fighting or big things will happen. I think it relates to number 2, how if someone doesn't agree with it, then they're scared their friendship or relationship might go off the track. How do social media platforms affect the way students at Armstrong view political issues?
Well, in this modern day, especially because of recent administrations becoming more and more involved with social media like TikTok and Instagram, and especially with people making careers over, such as debating with college students, or TV shows being posted online, clips from it on TikTok, I feel that more radicalized views are being centralized, which impacts people's political views very much.
Yeah.
I would say it really helped radicalize people in the sense that people can put out their opinions with little to no actual evidence behind them with absolutely no consequences. If I were to get on my phone and open Threads, I would find probably 2 things in the first 30 seconds. First would be a post probably calling for Trump to be arrested for any involvement in the Epstein files. The second one I would find is probably people promoting the actions of ICE and really pushing for it. So it's really dangerous because people aren't required to present all the evidence and aren't required to see the other side.
Yeah, especially with social media in general. people can get really just delusional with it and start adding fake stuff and just having all these other people just believe it with no evidence to back it up. Have you ever seen political disagreements turn into conflict or tension among students?
It hasn't necessarily turned into conflict, but there absolutely have been disagreements, whether that be in like debates or even just class discussions, but they have been handled by teachers, whether it be like just changing the subject, calling them out and saying, hey, that isn't the goal of this discussion, and really just saving politics for outside the classroom in the learning experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen minor disagreements. I haven't seen anything turn into like major fights or anything like that. But I feel like minor disagreements are okay as long as they don't escalate.
As long as it doesn't get past a certain point, or like if you're talking about it and go too far. Like, yeah, I agree. Do you think students are more influenced by their family's political views or by what they hear from friends and media?
I feel like as you're growing up and as you're forming views, your family definitely influences you the most. But in the modern day and as you become more involved in social media, I feel like social media is the main driving point these days because of the radical views, as we previously have talked about, that are present on social media. And that definitely shapes people's views a lot.
Yeah, media is getting so big in our lives that it's going to start influencing, maybe not as much by family because you're around them by so much, but definitely going to have an impact.
I think that the family's values really plant a seed in the head of their children. And as they go out, you're seeing more and more people on social media. I feel like they see specific beliefs out there, and they're more prevalent to believe them with little evidence just because of what they've seen with their parents. So I definitely think it's a combination between both family values and social media.
Yeah, I agree. How do you think teachers and administrators handle political discussions in the classroom?
I can't personally speak to administrators, I just haven't seen it, but I would say with the case of teachers, they try to assess the situation in a very neutral and biased manner. I look, for example, Mr. Cloak. Every time politics comes up in his classroom, which is inevitable, he tries to keep it as unbiased as possible. And if the topic really isn't relevant to whatever the discussion is, they can often try to just switch up the topic, and that solves any disagreements.
Yeah, I've seen teachers try to either change the subject immediately if it is not relevant at all, say in math class. You're not going to be talking about politics in math class, but in a government class, I certainly think the teacher, as Nate said, should take a more unbiased central view and try to sort out the disagreements like in that form.
Do you believe the political divide impacts how students treat each other, even outside or direct political conversations?
Yeah, I think more so when they're within political conversations, the divide, especially when two people disagree with each other, it's very centralized there in that sort of conversation. And I certainly see how people who they already have in their mind that they disagree with whatever this person says, in normal conversations will be more prone to argue with them than agree or at least try to understand what they're coming from.
I would say they absolutely change, but I would say that different political ideologies, they hold different values and morals that really shape their conversations they have with one another as they're interacting, not just in the school, but even out in the world.
Yeah, especially because if one student's so far on one side and the other on the other, then there's definitely going to be some type of impact between the two. How does hearing strong political opinions from others affect your willingness to share your own thoughts?
I would say it actually makes me more willing to share my own opinions, whether that be in support or opposition to whatever that person is saying, because in reality, progress in our country will not occur without respectful debate. Honestly, for that reason, it would really be an honor if I ran for like an office of some kind, whether it be Pennsylvania legislature or even Congress, for all I know. We really need to get into office and work with both parties to actually better the union, not just fight for our own, I would say, pride. I mean, you look to 1960, the presidential debates. Both Kennedy and Nixon had said that they have a true love for their country, and the issues they're debating isn't what the future of the country is, it's just how they're going to get there. And I think we really do need to return to that as a union.
Yeah, if a student shares their own thoughts, I think I'd be more willing to, because then it helps me feel like to be more comfortable talking about it with someone else who also either disagrees with my opinion or shares the same belief, because it just helps talk about it more and to grow each other.
Yeah, and I agree with Nate that we should get back to that less aggressive sort of debate. And, you know, being able to have the ability to debate with people who disagree with you instead of being like threatened by them, you should feel more like if you disagree with them, you should want to show them the other side and show them what you feel instead of be afraid to, because that's where problems arise in modern society.
Yeah. Do you think students today feel pressure to pick a side politically, even if they are unsure of their beliefs?
Absolutely. I would say social media through ads, targeted ads, people are always pushing their own agendas, their own ideas. This ultimately influences the belief of younger people who aren't necessarily as developed in the brain. I mean, the frontal lobe doesn't finish developing until you're 25. So ads like that are targeted towards the younger audience can really have a lasting impact. So I would say absolutely yes.
I would say, yeah, especially with, as Nate said, radicalized media. That's really what is normalized these days, is radicalized people on social media telling you how to feel and why you should feel that way, even and not showing you the other side. And I can also feel as in friend groups, as a result of this, will make you feel pressured to agree with them, or they may cut ties with you, basically.
Yeah, if you don't have the same opinion as like a friend, then they might just decide not to be friends anymore, which I think is a stupid reason, because we should all have our own beliefs and opinions. But definitely some pressure there to pick a side from either gonna lose a friendship or people on the internet trying to peer pressure you into choosing a side. In what ways, if any, has a national political climate shaped conversations at school?
Well, yeah. As you know, the current president or whatever the president is at the time makes these decisions, or the government makes these decisions, of course it will shape conversations. And of course, as we have talked about, people are expected to have their own opinions on these sort of actions. And so I think that as these decisions are made, people will talk about them, and they should be able to share their own opinions on it.
I would say you see an overall shift, people talking more about current events overall. You also see an active interest in the government and what they're doing. I think that's in part, at least in AHS, because of our great civics program. There's many people who are getting in and actually being hands-on with the government, whether that be working the polls, running the voter registration drives. So I believe that the young minds that are at this school and schools across the country are going to be the minds that change the country for the better, ideally. So honestly, for that reason, I would say that we shouldn't have older people running in Congress, presidency. We really should have the people who are most directly affected, whether that be by having children, they're sending their children through school, they're sending their kids out in the world. Those should be the people making the decisions for our country.
Yeah. Do you think high school is an appropriate place for political discussions, or should those conversations happen elsewhere?
I think high school is certainly an acceptable place, as long as things don't escalate, because as you are a teenager and your emotions run high because you're growing, those conversations can escalate. But I certainly think in high school you should be able to, because that's your main social place. All your peers, you're going to grow up with them, and so you should be able to inappropriately debate with them.
Yeah, you've been around them since kindergarten, so 13 years or so. And if you can't have a civil conversation about just your views and your opinions, then I think that's kind of silly.
I think there's absolutely a time and place for it in the school. So if you're going to discuss current events and politics as just hallway banner or even at the lunch table, absolutely go for it. I would go as far to say that if you're taking a history class, government class, that is where you would want to best talk about politics. Again, it's just about limiting the amount of confrontation and escalation of fights. And I mean, take for example, I believe it was in 2008, Bill Clinton was campaigning for Hillary, and he came to Katanning High School. So that was a place of education. I would say that's probably the best example, is where you can see politics kind of mingling with the education system.
How can students disagree on political issues while still respecting one another?
Well, before social media, the rise of social media, this was very common. People could always just disagree with each other, and that was that, basically. So I think if we sort of limit, I say, our social media intake on politics, I feel like that would be a good way for students to not form such great, like, radicalized views on things that they can't disagree with people.
Yeah, they'll see all these big name people on TikTok or Instagram, whatever platform they use, and they'll just take their ideas but to a certain extent, and more than try and hear the truth behind it all.
I really think it's about being intellectually honest and listening. The key to respect is being able to understand the other person's argument and being able to honestly learn more about them and why they believe what they believe. I had researched this, and in the 2015 State of the Union, Obama had said that he was willing to work with both Republicans and Democrats to pass bipartisan bills just for the better of the country, not his own interests. And I even looked to he's a representative from Kentucky, is Thomas Massey. He just openly spoke out to Congress calling, I believe it was last week, for the investigation and ideally arrest for anyone involved in the Epstein files. So you can see people stepping beyond party lines and understanding the other side, looking at all the evidence and making an informed decision on your own. So I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think so too. Do you think, or do you feel that political topics bring students together through discussion, or do they mostly create division?
I think it has the ability to do both. If you look at the last 30 years, politics become more of a source of division in our country, less of unity. Depending on the conversations, you can see people lashing out at each other, calling each other hateful names, instead of actually working towards a common goal. So it really has the ability to be both productive and harmful for both parties involved.
Well, thank you, Nate and Matta, for joining us today to get the hawk's eye view on the political divide in the U.S. Until next time, I'm Landon Perella of AHS-TV. Keep on soaring.